The world is united like never before. We all work together to solve global problems in various international organizations, like the EU and the UN. But these organizations also limit the nation's governmental power inside the country. And with the huge refugee problem EU has at hand, has Britain chosen to leave the EU? This is a problem for both the EU and Britain because they can't come to an agreement. And in Britain, not all people agree with the decision to leave the EU. This is people like Gary Younge, who wrote the article Britain's Imperial Fantasies Have Given Us Brexit. In the article, Younge expresses his opinion on the matter. And before I will begin my analysis of the text, here is a brief introduction on who Gary Younge is. The article Britain's Imperial Fantasies Have Given Us Brexit by Gary Younge was published February the 3rd, a Saturday, 2018. Gary Younge was born in January 1969 and is a British journalist and author and works at his daily job at The Guardian, a British newspaper, where he writes a monthly column for The Nation, and it's called Beneath the Radar. If the Second World War taught us anything, it was that you couldn't stand alone. They weren't called the Allies for nothing. I think the best way to start the analysis of this text is by beginning with the end. As Younge writes in the article, once again Britain has overplayed its hand, preferring to live in the past rather than learn from it. We find ourselves diminished in the present and clueless about the future. Page 3, lines 32 to 33. Through the article, Younge used arguments to validate his claim, which he narrows down into these two lines. This is also a great last sentence and an example of him wanting us to act, but not saying it directly. He's using the directive message function here, implicit in the text, telling us that this is the wrong way that Britain is looking out towards the world. It was through this distorted lens, let's put the great back in Great Britain, that a majority voted to leave. Page 2, lines 30 to 31. This quote is an example of him putting a negative discourse on the whole campaign by using the metaphor distorted lens to describe how the Brexiters manipulated the voters. On the first page of the article is an illustration by R. Fresson, which shows Britain, illustrated by a man walking with a worn-out sack that also is the flag of Great Britain. This worn-out old flag shows us that they once were an empire, but they are no more. In a way, it shows that they can't let go of the past and start looking towards the future. Just like the quote I used in the start. It says, preferring to live in the past rather to learn from it. Page 3, lines 62 to 63. There is also a big hole in the side of the flag, and historical items from the colonial times are falling out. Things like a picture of a boat symbolizing Britain's naval dominance during the colonial times, and the globe, which represents an empire that ruled all over the world, and probably also a depiction of the saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire, that was used to describe the British Empire in the colonial times. In the picture, EU is standing on the sideline, watching as Britain's walking away. A bit surprised, you might say. The background of this picture is mainly red, but with a bit of black. And I think this red color gives the picture an angry and maybe dramatic feeling, and gives us the feeling that something is wrong. It's not a very positive discourse that is towards this action. But if everything just is wrong with Brexit, why don't they just vote again? I think the text is very subjective in its argumentation, because he only arguments against Brexit. And Younge, as the sender, is trying to make us see through this manipulation and pride to give us a clear sight into the matter. But if you were a little more critical to Younge, you could say that he actually is trying to manipulate us through the article, not telling us the whole truth. I'm not sure, but something that I am certain about is that no one will not lose something no matter what happens.